Peter. No response. Peter! Still nothing. Peter Benjamin Parker, if you don't stop pretending to be asleep right now, I will dump a bucket of water on your head. This finally got a reaction. Peter opened his eyes, looked around, and laid back down. Are you kidding me? I don't see any buckets. Yasmin groaned, falling down onto the bed beside him. You're impossible. Maybe we can just sleep all day? We can't, Pete. I have a job and an actual life to get back to, unfortunately. Peter didn't say anything. Instead, he turned to Yasmin and wrapped his arms around her in a tight embrace. Yasmin found herself tucked up into Peter's chest, hearing his steady heartbeat in her ear. What are you doing? If you can't escape, then we don't have to leave. Peter! It was a slow morning. After finally letting Yasmin go, Peter was slow to get ready. Yasmin couldn't help but notice that she also dragged all of her motions out. At the rate they were going, they wouldn't be home until well after sunset. Yasmin found herself not upset by that prospect in the slightest. Finally, they were back on the road. Hey, Yasmin said as Peter drove. You remember that Italian place from the day we started driving up? Heck yeah, I remember that Italian place, Peter said, grinning. It's coming up soon, isn't it? Yasmin nodded, pulling up instructions to ensure they got there. It was early afternoon when they arrived, and it wasn't very busy. A waiter had them seated quickly. The waiter seemed to have an eye for Yasmin, going so far to pull out her seat when she sat down. Peter frowned. He didn't like that guy one bit. And what drink can I get the lovely lady to start with? The waiter, whose name tag said Doug, asked. I'll just have water, Yasmin said, unfazed by him. Doug turned to Peter, smile a bit strained. And for you? Water. Doug walked away after assuring them, mostly Yasmin, that their orders would be right out. The rest of the meal went similarly. Doug brought out the drinks, then the food, each time paying special attention to Yasmin and hardly sparing Peter a glance. Peter's stomach churned. He could hardly focus on the taste of his spaghetti. Soon, he was itching to get out of the restaurant, having hardly touched his food. But Doug came around one last time after picking up the check. He set a plate of dessert in front of Yasmin. We didn't order that, Peter said quickly, mentally checking himself for being so rash. Oh, that's right, Doug said. It's on me. He winked at Yasmin, lingering for a few moments. Well, thank you. I'll make sure your tip is good, Yasmin said, smiling at him. Clearly unsatisfied, Doug walked away with a small huff. Yasmin pushed her plate to the center of the table, handing Peter a fork. He raised his eyebrow. That was for you, you know. Yeah, but I'd feel bad eating it all in front of you. Besides, it'll be gone faster if we share. She gave Peter a knowing smile. Clearly, his discomfort hadn't been as well hidden as he had hoped. Soon, dessert finished, the pair headed out. Peter made a point to grab Yasmin's hand as they walked past Doug, shooting him a glare. Finally in the car, Yasmin chuckled. You didn't like our server much, did you? Peter frowned. Well, if you didn't notice, he didn't pay much attention to me. Oh, really? That was the issue, Yasmin hummed. I thought maybe it was because he was obviously trying to hit on me. Peter put the car into drive, face growing red. Well, we could have been on a date for all he knew. I can't imagine how many other girls he's hit on while actual couples go out. Yasmin gave a small smile. Well, I promise you he hasn't had much luck. Guys like him never do. Peter stayed quiet, trying to cool down from his jealousy. That was what it was, wasn't it? It wasn't like he hadn't been jealous before. It just hurt so much more after lately feeling like he was so close to finally being where he wanted to be. But Yasmin wasn't his girlfriend. She was his best friend, despite all these past 9 days had been. In that moment, Peter couldn't help but feel how spectacularly he was failing his plan. Get Yasmin to fall in love with him? How dumb was he? He could never change the way she felt. If only Peter knew. He hadn't failed at all. Yasmin just as silently sat in the passenger seat. She had watched Peter the whole meal, and knowing him so well, she caught every slight movement and detail that told her exactly the way he felt. She could read him like a book. Now if she could just find the words to tell him she felt the same way.
"Do we really need to go home?" Peter asked. For once, Yasmin found no trace of a joke in his tone. "What do you mean, Pete? Of course we have to go home." Peter frowned. "But what if we didn't? What if we just kept driving, hopped on a plane, and just went somewhere together?" Yasmin snorted. "You mean blow our life savings on the summer of our lives and forget we have responsibilities outside of ourselves?" Peter stayed quiet. "I wish we could too," she said. She grasped his hand, holding it tightly. "I've liked being with you, together, like this. I don't want that to end. But we have stuff to get back to. What's the city going to do without Spider-Man?" He sighed. "You're right. I like us together too." They went quiet. Yasmin could feel the words they hadn't said heavy in the air. The car parked on the side of the street. The engine quieted as Peter took out the key. "Need help with your bags?" Yasmin nodded, slipping out her door. It was silent as they marched up the steps. Silent as she opened her door. Silent as Peter loaded everything into the front room. And silent as they stood looking at each other. Peter suddenly had a million thoughts fly through his mind. Yasmin looked so beautiful in the light coming through her window. Yasmin stared at him with eyes as sad as his. He didn't want to sleep alone tonight. He didn't want to wake up and feel that jolt in his stomach because she wasn't there. He didn't want to leave her. He loved her. "I need to tell you something," Peter said. Her eyes widened. Can I tell you something first?" Peter slowly nodded, anxiety ripping up his insides. "My whole life, my parents said it would be you. That one morning, I'd wake up and I'd see you in a whole new way." She gave a small laugh, eyes dropping to the ground. "And they were right. Peter, I fell in love with you without even knowing it." "You love me?" Peter said, voice small. She nodded, smiling. "Yes, Peter. I love you. More than anything." Peter smiled with her, stepping forward and cupping her cheek in his hand. "Well, what took you so long?" "I think I was scared you wouldn't want me to love you." He wiped a tear with his thumb. When had she started crying? "Yasmin, I've wanted you to love me since I was 11 years old." Without waiting another second, he kissed her. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and his hand traced her waist. The masked feelings from the park had been ripped wide open, and she felt every bit of it on her lips. Every moment Peter had waited had never prepared him for this, and somehow he fell even further for Yasmin. They broke away from each other, grinning as their foreheads touched. "I love you, Yasmin. I love you, Peter." And he couldn't wait for those 9 days to turn into a lifetime together. Peter slowly... The masked feelings from the park had been rippled wide with, that's not a word, had never... Dramatic monologue. We love drama. It's the best.